Another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Trial by Stone!
This is what I came for.
Your vital essence, the dark crystal.
I can feel something. Hear it almost.
Don't move.
Don't move? Where would I go?
Quiet!
Here's your host, Philip Mitchell. Hey, I'm Philip and welcome to Trial by Stone. This is episode 1 of the podcast.
What's it for? Is that what you want to know? You want to know what this is all about? Is that it, girlfriend? You don't know?
The aim of this podcast is to talk about anything to do with the Dark Crystal. I've listened to a lot of podcasts and am inspired by Rebel Force Radio, the Indie Cast, Digital Cinema Cafe, This Isn't the Podcast You're Looking For, and many others to consider making a podcast. As a fan of the Dark Crystal, I searched on the internet to see if there was any Dark Crystal podcasts out there. But then I realized that there wasn't any. So, because of that, I decided to take on the challenge myself to produce a show of that caliber and hope that you, the audience, would enjoy listening to just as much as I have making it. Now let's begin with checking out news and headlines this month.
And begin, all the same, big change. Sometimes good, sometimes bad.
Crystal bats fly! Search the land! Search the water! Search the sky!
The official Dark Crystal website has been running several competitions since its launch last year, and which has been really exciting to see new developments for the Dark Crystal franchise. The first contest, Author Quest, allowed anyone out there to submit a story taking place before the events of the film, and that the winner would be able to turn their submission into a Dark Crystal novel. Unfortunately, they were only allowing entries from North America and the UK, and because I'm from Australia, I was excluded, but if I could have had the chance, I would have had a crack at it. I've read the winning short story, which you can get as an ebook compilation of the 5 top stories, and it was a great read. It made me realize that I wouldn't have the chance even if I had entered. I was very fortunate to get in contact with J.M. Lee, and he has kindly allowed me to interview him for the podcast later on in this episode. The second contest was a t-shirt design contest through the company Threadless. The winning design by Martin Knight has been released and you can buy it now from the website threadless.com. Once on the website, search Dark Crystal Dreams. This design features Jen and Kira looking at the castle of the crystal. I really like this design because it doesn't just feel like I'm wearing pop culture. It's subtle and I like how it depicts the journey Jen and Kira has to take to get to the castle in the film. The contest currently running is the Create a Dark Crystal creature. To enter, one would have to build a new creature that would fit into the world of Thra. The prize is a trip to New York to attend a screening of the Dark Crystal at Puppets on Film's opening night in October. It also includes a party with the chance to meet Brian Froud, the conceptual designer of the film, Wendy Froud, the creature designer on Jen and Kira, Cheryl Henson, the president of the Jim Henson Foundation, and author J.M. Lee, the winner of the previous mentioned Author Quest. Entries close on September the 1st, so if you haven't started yet and want the chance to win, get cracking now. See what I did there? For more details, check out the website at darkcrystal.com. As much as I would love to create a creature, I just don't have the skills to create a puppet, a maquette, or sculpture. However, I'm more excited about the next upcoming competition. There is going to be the Dark Crystal fan film competition. The only information that there is about it is the following from their website. We know our fans cosplay, build creatures, and write new scenes for the Dark Crystal, and we want to give you a chance to show off your talents. Next year we will be requesting submissions of your fan films for a chance to win another amazing prize. Stay tuned for more details. As a filmmaker, this is a contest that I will very likely attempt at entering to, though I'm just thinking about how I'll be able to pull it off without breaking the bank. I will be anticipating the launch of the contest with great interest. Now, I realise I haven't properly introduced myself. My name is Philip and I live in Australia, Melbourne to be specific, and my love for the Dark Crystal began as a kid in the 90s watching it countless times on good old VHS. My biggest memory from watching it when I was a kid was all the feelings and emotions I felt. I was terrified of the Skeksis, the Gartham, and even Olgra. And I was sad when Jen's master died and when Kira got stabbed by the Skeksis towards the end of the film. The thing I loved most about it all was how real it felt to me, in a way that Thra could have been Earth tens of thousands of years ago. The hard thing about watching a beloved childhood film is that it usually doesn't live up to the standards you hold dear. But for me, it isn't the case with the Dark Crystal. While I'm not afraid of the Skeksis, Gartham and Olgra, I've come to really appreciate the creativity of it all that Jim Henson and the crew of the Dark Crystal brought to life. I'd love to hear other fans' stories of how they got into the Dark Crystal and what you appreciate about it. My first guest for the show is J.M. Lee. He is an author and illustrator, and Joe is the winner of the Author Quest. His story, Shadows of the Dark Crystal, is set before the events of the film. The short story, along with 4 other submissions from different authors, is available now as an ebook called Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal Author Quest. Joe is currently writing the full manuscript, and I can't wait to read the novel when it's released. Now let's go to the Podling Village and chat with Joe about his story and passion for the Dark Crystal. G'day Joe, and thanks for being part of the first episode of Trial by Stone.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been a fun ride so far, and it's fun. I don't know. I've never been interviewed before for my writing, so that's kind of exciting.
Oh, well, by the way, I should say congratulations on winning the Author Quest.
Thank you. Thanks.
And I guess I was wondering, how did you find out about the Author Quest?
My agent actually forwarded me the website call for manuscripts, so I'm so thankful to her too, because I don't think I actually would have probably noticed that it was going on unless she had forwarded that to me. And there are so many people now after the contest winners have been announced who have been saying, oh shoot, I wish I could have entered, but I didn't even know it had happened. So I just feel really lucky that I've got people out there looking out for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even for myself, I think when I first heard about the Author Quest, I was somewhat interested. I mean, I'm not a writer per se, but I was sort of, interested in participating in it. But I guess unfortunately at the time with the rules and stuff that they're only accepting entries from the US and all that kind of stuff, which I can understand because I think different rules apply internationally. But I'm really hoping to see, what happens with the future contests, especially the fan film competition in particular. Sort of, that's sort of my alley. So with the whole filmmaking, so that's something I'd definitely attempt to.
Sure.
Have a crack at, yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's fun seeing all of the different types of. I don't know if they originally planned all these different contests and then decided to roll them out one at a time, or if maybe they had one and then they're like, wow, that was really fun. We should do this one and we should do this one. But it's really getting people excited about the franchise again, which is really great. And it's exciting to be part of it. It
is great to see the Dark Crystal sort of being brought back, not only with the stories that have come up the past couple of years, the manga comic and creation myths, but also the launch of the website as well, which is fantastic. And I'm very interested about what the future holds for the Dark Crystal.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So your winning entry short story is called Shadows of the Dark Crystal. Just for the audience who haven't had a chance to read it, can you just say what your synopsis is about?
Yeah, sure. So my story is about, she's a young Gelfling girl from a really remote Gelfling clan, and it all takes place back before anybody knew the Skeksis were bad or that they were draining Gelfling of their essence. And her clan kind of hears about some strange goings on, and her brother goes missing, and she kind of goes on a quest initially just to find her brother, and then she ends up finding more than she expected. So that's kind of the premise, and it's changed a little bit here and there since the short story in the ebook compilation, but it's more or less the same sort of duck out of water, person from a very far away place comes, more into like the regular Gelfling population, I guess, to kind of experience it for the first time, just as the reader's experiencing this kind of new rebooted Dark Crystal world for the first time.
Okay, so you mentioned that there was like some changes that was made from what you submitted to the actual ebook publication. Were the changes like just very minor, or?
They're pretty minor. I mean, unlike a lot of other people who submitted full novels, or at least wrote the full novel before picking out their submission, I had only written the introduction. Because I was pretty aware that it was very likely that, things always change between the first draft, and I didn't want to lock anything in that might, be that either couldn't benefit from feedback from Jim Henson Company or from Grasset and Dunlap, or, So as far as the changes go, yeah, I would say in the big picture, they're pretty minor. But actually, in all the changes that we've decided to kind of move forward with have definitely made the story more interesting and better than I probably could have come up with originally on my own. So it's been a really exciting experience.
The one change I probably noticed as well, the title originally was called The Ring of Dreams, and for the ebook publication, It was changed to Shadows of the Dark Crystal.
Well, without trying to spoil too much of it, I'll say that originally The Ring of Dreams, the title kind of referred to the Gelfling coming together at the very end of the Gelfling gathering to build the Wall of the Prophecy, which is the kind of the prophecy that Kira and Jen find in the film The Dark Crystal. And the scope of the plot changed a little bit. So it wasn't really an appropriate end point for the first novel. So we decided to go with something a little bit more mysterious, and something also I wanted to kind of fold the Dark Crystal in there as well, just so that anybody maybe passing by who saw it would be like, oh, what's this book about? Oh, it's the Dark Crystal. It has the Dark Crystal in the title. So
is that just safe to say that might be potentially what the title of your novel will be called, or?
I think so. I'm not actually totally sure, so I can't really speak, to that with great confidence. But for now, that's the working title. Yeah.
What was the writing process when it came to writing down the story to enter for the author quest? What were some of the challenges that you went through with the writing process?
Sure. So I'm an outliner. I really spend a lot of time when I'm writing building up the story from beginning to end. So I kind of outlined the basic premise of the story so that I kind of knew what my projection was when I wrote the first part. And I think maybe one of the most difficult parts was trying to guess what kind of a story the judges were looking for, and trying to make sure that the beginning of the story serviced all of those, not requirements necessarily, but you're trying to you're kind of stabbing in the dark. You're trying to guess what people are wanting out of this book. And not only do you not know what it is, but you know that in the first 3 chapters of your novel, you're not necessarily going to be able to show everything that these people want to see, even if it would be later on in the book. So just trying to indicate or foreshadow that maybe one particular scene that's going to be really great, but it won't happen until the end of the book. Kind of trying to foreshadow that it's going that way, but without having to put it in the beginning, and pace yourself in order to show that you're telling a good story, but that you kind of have your hands tied in a way because you can't actually show them the entire novel, So I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess the pacing and just trying to decide what to show, what not to show was very difficult.
From the author quest, they supplied with a Gelfling gathering PDF document that sort of outlined a lot of things about what they had in mind. I guess all the characters and all the clans and stuff. Was those resources actually useful to you as part of the writing process?
Yeah, I did find them pretty useful because even if you read all of the manga and watch the movie a million times, there's always this extra stuff. And I also found that that document and the online encyclopedia, there was a lot of stuff in there that wasn't in the movie or wasn't in, the manga or the graphic novels. But the fact that they had included it in that PDF made it kind of clear that that was something they were interested in seeing, you know, in an eventual story. There was a lot of like characters introduced who their descriptions on the website might have been kind of vague, but it's like, oh, so you want there to be this character, but you know, what does this character do, or why would you write about this character? Am I supposed to, you know? So it's kind of like a guessing game in a way. But yeah, there was a lot of information in there that, you know, kind of gave me ideas or inspired me to think about maybe a plot point that maybe I wouldn't have thought of just by watching the film.
And I guess, like, in particular with your story, like, it's based on members of the Drenchen clan.
Right.
And then following on to the Spritan clan. What was your decision-making to tell a story based on, well, mainly on the Drenchen clan for your story?
I guess when I was first reading on the website about the different clans of Gelfling, the Drenchen really stuck out to me at first because they're just kind of the underdogs in a way. Like, they're kind of the black sheep of the Gelfling clans. It's kind of sort of everybody else has, like, you know, beautiful long flowing hair, or they're very majestic, or they have these, you know, amazing technologies or whatever. And then the Drenchen are just like, they're the swamp ones, like, you know, and
they're the Kermit the Frogs of the Dark Crystal.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, well, you know, I don't know. I wanted to, first of all, I like writing for kind of the black sheep. I think a lot of people relate to that character, someone who kind of maybe, you know, their people are kind of looked down upon a little bit, and they get to really prove themselves and show, you know, what they're made of. And I also thought that in terms of introducing readers to this kind of new way of seeing Thra, I thought taking someone who was kind of from a remote area and maybe hadn't seen Thra herself would be a natural way of kind of reintroducing people to a place that is, it's the Thra that they know, but it's from, you know, it's way different too. So I thought it'd be a good narrative device as well.
Yeah, and I mean, like, for myself as a reader, like, I really did enjoy your story.
Thank you.
I guess the other thing I'm really interested in the whole, you know, writing the short stories and all that. When you like writing songs, do you have the music in your head, or do you just sort of, you know, you write down the words and sort of leave that music part, you know, for interpretation?
Well, for me, I'm not really a musician. So for me, it's more about poetry, I guess, in a way. But I mean, I would hope that maybe someday, you know, someone could come in and make music that would go with the lyrics. But yeah, I suppose that for me, I'm more thinking about it from like a poetry type of perspective, because that's more what I'm familiar with. So yeah. And also, I mean, the music is a huge part of kind of the Gelfling lore. They're all about, you know, their storytellers are called song tellers, and I kind of get the impression that their entire history is kind of an oral history told through songs and stories, which is, I love the concept. And one of the characters, if you've read the story, Kylan, he's going to go from being kind of an awkward, you know, kind of apprentice type of character to really coming into his own as a song teller. So that's definitely something that you'll see more of in the final manuscript.
I do like the whole music, and even, like, I guess talking about music, I mean, yeah, the Gelflings are known for the, you know, playing the, you know, the wood instruments, or you know, or Kira, who is singing throughout the film. So they do have like a big, you know, music presence in the Dark Crystal overall, and also just the soundtrack itself it's
amazing.
Trevor Jones, yeah, it's just epic. Like, you know, I mean, the Dark Crystal, like, yes, it's like a children's film, but the score does not have that children's film feel to it at all.
No, not at all. It's very well, and like if you listen to a lot of the really complicated work that went into the score kind of near the end, especially when all of the like the big stuff at the castle, the crystal is happening, and even the chants that the mystics do are really intense, actually. If you ever just like stop watching it and just listen to it, you wouldn't even necessarily know you were watching a movie about, you know, puppets. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and that's the thing about the film. Like, I mean, as a kid, like, there's just so many films that, you know, lose my suspension of disbelief, and there's a couple of films that do that, like Star Wars and a couple other other films, but I think the Dark Crystal was probably the big one that sort of, I can every time, even when I watch it today, I can still lose my suspension of disbelief, being that really young kid watching the film on VHS.
Yeah, well, as a kid, I remember watching and being like, these are puppets, like in the beginning, but by the time you get to the end, you've totally forgotten. You're totally just immersed in it. And yeah, it's definitely an experience.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And I guess like and there'd be moments where like I just can't believe that it's puppets. Yeah, like I mean, for example, like every time I see like at the start of the film and you see Jen running towards his master and just those wide shots and you just see him running, or him like, starting his journey, just those wide shots, it's like you don't see any strings or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean obviously like, there was, stunt people, inside the costume, but, you still believe that they will, yeah.
Yeah, it's edited really well. I mean, the whole thing is just done so, even like people compare it to The Labyrinth, and people have asked me a lot about like, what are your feelings on The Labyrinth? Because after they find out about the Dark Crystal thing, and I mean, The Labyrinth is amazing, but one thing I have to say with Dark Crystal is, there's no people, there's no humans. And I think that's one of the things about the Dark Crystal that makes it really special, is that you're just completely at the mercy of these completely fantastical creatures with not really, I mean, even the Gelfling are like human-like, but they're not supposed to be like little people, so it's definitely unique.
I didn't really get introduced to the film till probably about probably 5 or 6 years ago, just watching on DVD. So I never like grew up with Labyrinth. For me, it was always the Dark Crystal the whole time.
Oh, sure.
And like watching the Labyrinth, like I do appreciate for what it is, but like you said, with the Dark Crystal, there's no human actors or anything like that. So it's like you could easily like fall into that world. Whereas with Labyrinth, it's kind of a bit hard in that respect. Yeah.
Right. It's a little bit more like almost Wizard of Oz, like where, you're in the normal world and then you fall into this fantasy world, which is what the story is trying to tell. But yeah, Dark Crystal just completely removes you from any point of Earth reference, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, except I guess the interesting about it, I guess, with Thra is almost like an anagram of Earth in a way.
Right.
And I guess, and I like my interpretation of that could be that, for example, that the Dark Crystal could have been something that could have really happened in Earth, like tens of thousands of, or millions of years ago kind of thing.
Or in the future.
That could happen, yeah. Oh, God. How did you discover the Dark Crystal for the first time?
My dad actually is the one who rented it on VHS and made me watch it because he thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And of course, the first time I saw it, I was absolutely terrified of it. I had nightmares about big black beetles crashing through my bedroom walls and taking me away, the Skeksis. And, I think most kids, because I was born in 1984, so I was young when I first watched the film, which came out in 1982. And then once I had seen it a couple times, I got really attached to the idea that I could scare my friends with it. So then I got, it became like kind of an endearing film. I really, really loved it because I would show my friends and they'd be like, oh my God, what is this? So yeah, it's been around since I was a child. And it's one of those things that kind of, as I grew up, I kind of forgot about, it was never, it's not like I watched it every year or something like that, but it was interesting because it's always been kind of in the back of my mind. Like, you'll be wanting to, I want to watch a movie tonight. What do you want to watch? And then suddenly it's like, let's watch The Dark Crystal, and then you dig out the old cassette tape and put it in and you just fall back into the world again. So when the contest got announced, I was like, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to get back into, I'm going to have a trip down memory lane and, do it. So it was a long time coming, I guess.
Because I discovered the Dark Crystal on VHS that my parents had, and it was just one of those films as a young kid. I would watch it over and over and over again. It was that and Star Wars were the films I kept watching a lot, just repetitively. Sure. And just really fall into that world. And yeah, like, I mean, sort of really into it in primary school, and then sort of high school, sort of, not lost interest, but just, didn't, sort of, it disappeared away from me for a bit. And then it wasn't really till, the past couple of years of just the recent developments with the Dark Crystal, with all these stories being told, and with yourself, contributing to the canon of the Dark Crystal. How do you feel about that?
I feel totally like I'm still kind of in shock, honestly. Like, it's people keep asking me, how's it going? How's it? I'm like, oh, it's going. I'm writing. I don't really think about it. And then I kind of realize, like, I'm part of the family now. It's totally weird. It's totally weird. You should enter the film. You should get into those contests too. I mean, like, they're out there, man. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. I think like thinking about the fan film, I'm just like, how am I going to do it, on a low budget without breaking the bank? That's sort of, that's the only thing I'm really thinking of with the film. Do you have a favorite scene and character from the film?
Jeez, yeah. Well, I mean, Kira's my favorite. I think she is such a different character from Jen that their contrast. I mean, obviously, there's only two Gelfling, right? So they couldn't be the same. But my favorite scene is definitely the one where they are they're really near the castle of the crystal, and they get attacked by the Garthrim, and then they jump, and they're kind of jumping off this cliff, and then Kira's wings come out. Spoilers if you haven't seen the film, I guess, by now. But I just love that scene because it's just so surprising. Like, it's like you're like, oh God, what are they going to do? They're going to fall. They're going to fall in some water or something. I don't know. And then suddenly she has wings, and I think, as far as kind of, it's just an example of how there's so much going on behind the scenes of the Dark Crystal that isn't even mentioned. You know what I mean? Like, there's no point where Jen is like, oh, I've heard girl Gelflings have wings. Like, it's not even mentioned until it happens, and it's so surprising and wonderful. It's just a great, great moment. So I would say that's probably my favorite scene.
I do remember there was actually a screening for the Dark Crystal in Melbourne about a couple of months ago. They actually had a week-long screening for the Dark Crystal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was fantastic. And I went on, I think it was like the second last day of the week that they had screening. That did get a lot of laughs. Flying down with the wings, it's like...
I don't have wings.
Of course not. You're a boy.
I don't have wings. You're a boy. Of course not. You're a boy.
Yeah. Dummy.
Yeah, that did get a lot of laughs with that one. And also, I guess, the Chamberlain's whimperings and he makes throughout the film, like,
I hate your whimper.
Oh, yeah. Man, the scene where they, after he loses the trial by stone and they tear off all of his robes, that terrified me as a kid. And it even, like, I watched it again many times to get ready for this manuscript, and every time I was just like, oh God, this is a terrible scene. Like, wow, they're going there.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's where I got the name of the podcast, Trial by Stone, is
right.
from the scene. I mean, which is definitely one of my favorite scenes. I just love the back and forth of the swords clashing, the stone, and sort of the outcome of it all. But I mean, if I did have another favorite scene, my favorite scene would have to be sort of when Jen is entering Olgra's observatory, and sort of, before he enters, he's in this like kind of like this dark cave.
Yeah.
And I actually remember, like, because watching it on VHS, all you saw was nothing but black.
Right. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So it's like all you heard was Jen talking, and he's just like, what am I doing here, or whatnot. And then once the doors reveal to see Olgra's observatory, is like I don't know, to me it was just like a mind-blowing kind of moment. For that. So that would be definitely one of my favorite scenes. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think actually the scene that you're talking about is right after, like, he's like, one of the things I love about Jen is that he has this kind of almost like teenage boy, like real life human kind of personality sometimes. Like, he's walking through the forest and then those like tentacle bushes like roll away from him. He's like, well, that's weird. Like, it just sounds like something
Yeah.
you would, like could be posting on Twitter or something like that sometimes.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, you've started like writing with the manuscript. Is it going to be like a like an expansion or continuation based on your short story, or is it going to be something a little bit different?
It will be the same story as the excerpt, more or less. So, yeah, I think some people wrote short stories and then maybe planned to write a completely different novel later. But what you see in the Dark Crystal special ebook anthology is essentially the beginning of my story. So it's pretty much I mean, some changes have been made, but overall it's the same idea.
Yeah, like when I was reading the story and just sort of got to the end, I'm just like, oh, I just want to know more of this. What happens next in the story? So no, I'm glad that like it's just like
oh, good.
That I guess the first like couple of chapters, it's sort of like the first couple of chapters of your upcoming novel. So I'm very very excited about that. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're excited.
So out of your story from the ebook special, do you have a favorite of any of the other entries?
Yeah, actually, I really enjoyed Nancy Gray's. When I was reading hers, I was like, man, I might have some competition here. I think she took it. I'm a sucker for pirates and sailing, and she had both of kind of that whole vibe going on in hers, and it was really exciting because it was so different from mine as well. So I would say probably that's the one that kind of stuck out the most to me, where I was like, oh, I gotta watch out for this lady.
So how can people find you?
I've got a personal website at joeyverse.com, and I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook. So I'm an illustrator as well. So you'll see like a mix of illustrative work that I do, and as well as my writing updates and other non-Dark Crystal projects that I'm working on.
Thanks for joining up on the show, and hope to speak to you next time.
No, thanks for having me.
Take care.
You've already taken too long, Gelfling. Hurry!
At last the crystal calls. It is time to return to the castle.
The crystal calls! To the crystal chamber!
Well, that's all the time I have for this month's Trial by Stone. Big thanks to you all for listening to the first episode of the show. Special thanks to JM Lee for being the first guest, and to Shannon for assisting me with behind the scenes. If you want to contact myself about the show, send me an email at trialbystonepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/trialbystonepodcast, or on Twitter at trialbystonepod. If you enjoyed the show and think that others would like it too, then please write a review on iTunes and help other Dark Crystal fans find out about the podcast. The more reviews there are, the more new listeners find out about Trial by Stone. I hope you all enjoyed this podcast and come back for the next episode of Trial by Stone.